Let it be. But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2020 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie T aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2020 NFL Draft using our brand new grading scale from 5 to 1. Each pick will be assessed a score. We will take those scores, total them up, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right. You, the viewer out there, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Raiders, next; Vegas, next; LVR, next; Raiders. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Las Vegas Raiders. Got to get used to saying that. I think I'm doing a really good job with the process of spitting that out. I'm going to say Oakland at some point. Hopefully I don't do it in this video, but I know that's going to come down the pipeline a bunch of times. Eventually I will phase it out. But this Vegas draft for the Raiders is the inaugural draft as they have now made the switch over to Vegas. They're going to open their new venue this year, and it looks good on the outside. We'll see how it looks on the inside. But I tell you what, none of that matters unless the product that they're putting on the field gives you something to be excited about. And I must say, this particular draft, building off the one that they put forth last year with Michael Mayock in the driver's seat as the GM, is starting to look like a different Oakland Raiders group out there. Now, I will say this as well. John Gruden had his fingerprints on this draft a little bit, more so than he did last year, where I felt like it was a lot more Michael Mayock driven. And, you know, look, Michael Mayock had a lot to do with what went down in this draft. Don't get me wrong. But I had a debate with one of my best friends who is a massive Raiders fan, and we debated on who ran the first round of this draft. And I felt like it was divvied up. Hey, Mike, you get one, I get one. I feel like the first one was all Gruden. The second pick was all Mike Mayock. We'll get to that when we get to those selections. But look, I said this on IG when I posted the artwork for this video. This was all about adding wide receiver help, which the Raiders did a bunch of times in this draft. This was all about adding more Clemson players, which they seem to love to do, have done it the last two drafts. And this was all about adding more collective team speed. Can't have enough of it. They didn't have enough of it, especially on the offensive side of the football last year for this Raiders club. They added a bunch more speed on both sides of the football as they're looking to get faster in a division where speed kills. You look at what the Chiefs have done and what they're all about. They're essentially a track unit on football grass. You look at what the Broncos have done now to kind of keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, with the Chiefs. They're now an official track unit as well, playing on a grass surface. Now the Raiders are saying, let us throw our name in the hat as a team that can now run across the board. So this is a fast division, maybe the fastest in football, and the Raiders are now adding themselves in the mix as a team that you have to worry about with their speed. And the reason you have to is because of what they did in this draft and what they did in last year's draft. Let's talk about what they did in the 2020 NFL draft, though, and how they have gotten themselves in a position to compete. Not saying that they're going to win the division, but don't sleep on the Oakland Raiders. Or excuse me, there it is. I knew it was coming. Hopefully that's the first and the last time. Don't sleep on these Vegas Raiders in 2020. And it's drafts like these that should get you excited as we take a look at what the Raiders were able to do. All 7 picks are on the screen in front of you. I've got my write-ups for all 7 players. I'll be reading from them as I break this draft down. And of course, we start in the first round. Raiders had 2 first-round selections. The first of those 2 first-round selections, 12th overall wide receiver out of Alabama, Henry Ruggs III is the selection. 5'11", buck 88, 4.27 speed. We know the guy can run. We saw it at Alabama. To me, he was the most electrifying and dynamic player in this entire draft when you're talking speed and acceleration. I know a lot of people love KJ Hamler. I'm not as big and high on KJ Hamler as most. I'm a big Henry Ruggs the third guy, however. And I'll take it a step further. A lot of people thought that he was going to be the third receiver taken off the board, and for good reason. He was my third rated wide receiver in this draft. However, I made the declaration on my mock draft that I thought he was going to be, and I stuck steadfast to this, I thought he was going to be the first Alabama receiver taken. So I wasn't shocked that he went ahead of Jerry Jeudy. I was shocked that he went ahead of both Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. That was a bit of a surprise to me. But I'm not shocked that he went off the board before Jerry Jeudy, because that kind of speed mesmerizes people. We saw it with John Ross just a few years ago in the first round, where I didn't think he deserved to be a top 10 pick. And you could argue he didn't deserve to be a first round pick, period. And yet he goes in the top 10. Why? Because he could run. Henry Ruggs can run. But to me, he's a much more complete wide receiver than John Ross ever was. So let's get to this breakdown. 40 catches for 746 yards and 7 touchdowns in 15 games in 2019 for the Crimson Tide. For his career, 98 grabs for 1,716 yards and 24 scores in 41 games. As I mentioned already, had a first-round grade on Henry Ruggs. Had him as my number 3 wide receiver behind the aforementioned CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy, but I thought he was going to come off the board before Jeudy, but I did not think he was actually a better receiver all around than Jeudy. But that's nor here nor there. Love this package that you're getting in Henry Ruggs, and he's not just a deep threat. I think he can do a lot of different things, and that's where some of the disconnect comes with some people. When they talk Henry Ruggs, they think that he's just a one-trick pony. He's not a guy that can create for himself. I vehemently disagree, but let's get into this breakdown. Speed and acceleration, to me, are at the top of the list when you're talking Henry Ruggs. Those are the first things that jump off the screen at you, especially the acceleration. Yeah, guys can run in a straight line, but it's the ability to start and stop and to hit fifth gear within, 2 steps. And nobody, to me, in this draft does it quite like Henry Ruggs the third. So this is a guy that can absolutely take a swing pass out of the backfield, a wide receiver screen, or as we saw, I believe it was against South Carolina, a slant and go 85 yards for a touchdown. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take a lot of space. It doesn't take a lot of opportunity. You make a mistake, you pay for mistake when dealing with Henry Ruggs. Quickness. This is the thing that a lot of people, I think, kind of underestimate with Henry Ruggs, is his quickness. And I don't know why, because, I've talked to people and, he can't create for himself. You throw him a hitch and he's not going to make anybody miss. And he can't take a short pass and turn it into a big play. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Are we having this conversation? Like, this guy outruns angles, and some of it is just quickness. He catches the football, gives you a little shake, and then he's able to turn it up. And it's that quickness that allows him to take that first step and then turn on that acceleration and run by you. It's amazing that some people don't think that this guy can do more than just run deep routes. A lot of his routes at Alabama weren't even deep routes. He wasn't even the go-to guy on deep routes. He was a guy that worked the underneath routes and then got the yards after the catch. Speaking of which, that's the next strength, is run after the catch. He was probably one of the most prolific run after the catch guys at Alabama. Obviously, they had a ridiculous group of receivers: Devontae Smith. They had Jalen Waddle. They had Jerry Jeudy, and of course Henry Ruggs. I don't think there was a better collection of wide receivers in all of college football than what Alabama was putting on the football field. And so Ruggs was just a part of that group. But to me, he was the guy that did more with less. Maybe Jalen Waddle too. He was really explosive and dynamic, but nonetheless, run after the catch, ridiculous for Henry Ruggs. Toughness. To me, this is where he separates himself from a guy like John Ross. When you start talking about smaller, diminutive receivers with a lot of speed, a lot of times you see a guy running this fast, less than $190, and you're thinking, okay, he's probably soft, or at least not a guy that wants to go over the middle, wants to do the dirty work. Henry Ruggs will run your dig route. Henry Ruggs will run your comeback route. Henry Ruggs will run the slant, knowing that linebacker is there and not afraid. Henry Ruggs will catch that drag, that shallow cross, knowing that there could be a corner sitting in cover 2 waiting on him on the other side. He's not afraid. He's got a nice compact build, similar to the guy that I'm going to comp him to, which is the reason why I think that guy doesn't have a lot of injuries to this point of his career in terms of getting hit. Now, he does get hit sometimes and he's slow to get up, but for the most part, he's kept on ticking to this point of his career, and I see a lot of that in Henry Ruggs as well. Hands. His hands are official. That was another thing I wasn't quite sure about with a guy like the receiver out of Washington for the Cincinnati Bengals. His name just escaped me that quick, but his hands weren't all that official to me. Not like Henry Ruggs, who can catch it in traffic, who's a guy that, like I said, can take a hit and still hold on to the football. Once he gets his hands on the ball, hard to get it out of his possession. John Ross is his name. I feel like his hands are really good. They're like Deshaun Jackson-esque in terms of his ability to pluck the football out of the air. Can create separation. All of the Alabama receivers did a tremendous job of creating separation. Henry Ruggs, the third, no different in that department. So it's not like you have a guy that you've got to draw up plays to get him open. He can win on his own and separate against man-to-man coverage. And so that allows you to play him out wide or in the slot. He can win in either situation. Legit deep threat to me. You didn't see it as much at Alabama, which is crazy being that this is a 4.27 guy, but they had so many guys. All of the guys that I named, Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy, all of these guys could run. So there wasn't that one guy. It's not like one guy was really big and, and Henry Ruggs was the designated deep ball go-getter. All of them could run the deep ball. All of them could run the route tree. And so, he wasn't the guy that was just getting a bunch of down the field targets. They distributed the football at every single level to all of their receivers. And I think that does a lot for Henry Ruggs in the department of, hey, this guy can run routes at every level. He's not just a one-trick pony. So, but he can get vertical. The 4.27 40 tells you that. Versatility. And I've kind of spoken to this, but not specifically, but in a roundabout way, I've just told you that this is a very versatile wide receiver. He can play in the slot, he can play out wide, gives you some return ability on kickoffs. You can run him on jet sweeps. You can give him the football on wide receiver screens and things of that nature. So there are so many ways to get a guy like this involved in the offense. And you can move him around. And you've got a couple of guys now. You got another one in this draft that you brought in with versatility that will allow you to do some creative things from an offensive standpoint that will give defensive coordinators something to think about as they prepare for the Las Vegas Raiders moving forward. Solid route runner. Again, I think he does a lot of things well, and this is another one that you get from him is his ability to run routes, and that's why I think he can win in the slot. If you want him to kick inside, he can win outside against man-to-man coverage. He's a guy that understands leverage and does a really good job. And like I talked about him separating, he does all of the things you want from a guy in the slot to win quickly. He does all the things you want from an outside, big-time playmaking wide receiver in the ways of separating, coming out of breaks quickly, snapping back to the football, plucking the ball out of the air with his hands. There's a lot of good here with Henry Ruggs. And then he competes as a blocker. I'm not saying he's the best blocker in the world, but he is willing to work for food. He's not one of these guys that's selfish, that doesn't want any parts of that. Worst case scenario, he can run you off. You're going to run with him because you don't want to sleep on his speed. So if he just runs you off, he can run a lot of guys out of the play, but he competes as a blocker in that department as well. Weaknesses, obviously his size comes into play. People want to talk about that all the time. Knock yourself out, 5'11", $188. I get it. But when you got the kind of speed that he has and the ability that this guy brings to the table, nobody's going to be talking about his speed or, his size when you see the speed and the dynamic ability that he brings to the table. Can struggle with press and jams at the line of scrimmage. I thought there were some games last season, especially against teams that were physical with him at the line of scrimmage, i.e. LSU, where he didn't have as great a game. He did make some big catches as the game progressed, but not the kind of performance that you were looking for from Henry Ruggs in that particular game, and it was because LSU was a little physical with him at the line of scrimmage. But there's ways around that. You can circumvent a guy that may struggle initially early in his career with getting off of jams and press coverage. You start sending him into motion. You can use stack releases and formation. So there's ways to get around that. But right now, I think as an early part of his career and a young receiver, he may struggle with jams off the line of scrimmage. And then fumbles is something that I just want to mention. 4 fumbles in 3 seasons. That's not a ton, but for a receiver, that's a high number. But this is the caveat here. 3 of these 4 fumbles came in 2017. The other fumble came in 18. There were no fumbles in 2019. So I think he's trending in the right direction in the fumble department. And just another side note, only 1 dropped pass in 2019 for all the targets that he received. Only 1 dropped pass. So you're talking about a guy very reliable in the hands department and coming down with the football, which is what I kind of spoke to a little bit earlier. So there's so much to like here. I love this selection. I have no problems with the Raiders passing on Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. Henry Ruggs is legit. He's a real deal wide receiver at the next level. My comp for him is Tyreek Hill. I know some people may not agree with that, but he's the closest thing, and I've said this a million times during this whole entire process when talking about Henry Ruggs. He's the closest thing I've seen to Tyreek Hill since Tyreek Hill hit the NFL landscape and started destroying the league the way that he has in his brief NFL career. I've seen teams try to go out and find a guy like that. The John Ross selection by Cincinnati is a great example of a team chasing after a player like Tyreek Hill. He looks nothing like Tyreek Hill. His body type isn't anything like Tyreek Hill. He hasn't been durable like Tyreek Hill. Henry Ruggs is the closest thing I've seen to Tyreek Hill. And you've seen Tyreek Hill up close and personal in the division for the last 4 years. You know what he's capable of. And so, or 3 years, I believe it is now, going into his 4th season. You know exactly what that guy's capable of. And you said, you know what? He's so nice. I want one of my own. And you were willing to pay the price in the 1st round, 12th overall selection. Wide receiver out of Alabama, Henry Ruggs III, for me, of course, is a 5. As we move on to the next Raider selection in this draft. 1st round, 19th overall selection, cornerback out of the Ohio State University, Damon Arnett is the selection. One of the bigger surprises of the 1st round was Damon Arnett, hearing his name called in the top 20 of this draft. I don't think a lot of people were outraged by the pick necessarily, just surprised. And again, when you talk about the cornerback position, particularly in this draft, after you got past the first 2 cornerbacks in this draft, those 2 being Jeff Okudah and C.J. Henderson, you really could have put the next, 10 corners in any order you like. So, depending on who you talk to, the next guy out for me, in my case, the next guy off the board was the next guy that got selected in the draft, which was the Clemson cornerback. But, you could have talked to somebody else. In the case of Michael Mayock, Damon Arnett might have been his next corner on the board. And he looked pretty stoked when they turned the card in and heard Arnett's name called and the pick submitted and officially made by Roger Goodell. And he was pumped. And to me, the first pick was all John Gruden. All Gruden with Henry Ruggs. They needed to add speed. They didn't have enough speed at wide receiver last year. That's why the Antonio Brown signing was so important for that offense, because this offense can only be maximized if you've got a guy that can take the top off the defense. You brought Tyrell Williams in to be a secondary option, not a primary option. We saw that he can't handle that role last year. Now you get a guy like Henry Ruggs. You add in another receiver that you drafted later on in the draft in Bryan Edwards. And now Tyrell Williams is probably even more comfortable as a 3rd option, as a 4th option, potentially, depending on how Hunter Renfrow is used moving forward. So everyone starts to fit into their proper slots as you get other guys that come in that can produce for you at a much higher level. And so a lot of people think about Henry Ruggs in that selection and forget about Gruden and how he used Joey Galloway in Tampa Bay. Like, I think you're going to see a lot of the same concepts with Henry Ruggs in Oakland or in Vegas now. But this pick to me was all Mike Mayock. Damon Arnett is a Mike Mayock type of guy, tough, rough around the edges, rugged, played against some really good competition. This smells like a Michael Mayock selection if I've ever seen one. 6 feet, 195, ran a 4.56 at the combine. Now, that's the time that was given, but he has the most mysterious 40 time of the 2020 combine. There was so much debate whether he ran a 4.43, as Mike Mayock said that he had people clocking him at, or if he ran the 4.56, that was the official time given by the electronic stopwatch at the combine. whatever the case may be, there are people that said, look, before he even got going, 12 tenths of a second ran off the clock. And so he really never got a fair shake in his 40. So if you peel off those 12 tenths of a second, now you're sitting there looking at a 4.44 instead of a 4.56. So maybe that 4.43 is more in the ballpark of where he ran. I don't know. I can't say. The 4.56 is what was given as an electronic time. Whatever the case may be, he plays faster than 4.56. I don't know. I didn't see 4.43 on tape. I can tell you that much. But nonetheless, 1 tackle for loss, no sacks, 8 pass breakups, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, and a pick 6 in 13 games in 2019 for his career. 4 tackles for loss, 22 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 1 pick 6 in 53 games. I had a second round grade on him. He was my 10th corner in this draft. You took him as the 4th corner in this draft after Okudah, Henderson, and Terrell. Off came Damon Arnett off the board. And so I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later. But strengths, solid size for an NFL cornerback at 6 feet, $195. I think he'll get a little bit bigger as he continues to grow in the league. Plays an aggressive brand of ball. He's one of those guys, very physical at the line of scrimmage. He's got a nice stiff jab that really stops the momentum of that receiver initially and makes them regroup and have to start that route all over again. And so he's one of those guys, just really physical, very hands-on. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But he's, to me, a guy that plays a physical brand of football at the cornerback position. It can be a gift and a curse. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Was diagnosed with OCS. And, for me, OCS is a term I developed a while back. And it came from an Ohio State corner once upon a time that you selected in the draft in Garyon Conley. OCS is other corner syndrome, or otherwise known as opposite corner syndrome. And what happens is you're either going to go one of two ways with that. To me, I call it the dyslexia of cornerbacks, the cornerback position. You're going to go one of two ways with OCS. Either you're going to take it as a challenge, like people with dyslexia do. Take it as a challenge to work harder so that it's not something that holds you back. It's not something that you use as a crutch. And instead, you use it to power you, to give you more motivation, to put forth the effort to be a better reader, to understand things in a better way. You can either take OCS and having all these targets come your way because you're opposite, or you're the other guy on the opposite side of a dominant corner, so you know the ball is coming your way and you better be ready. Garyon Conley, I thought, handled it well when he was the opposite corner, the other guy on the other side of Marshawn Lattimore. I thought Damon Arnett handled OCS very, very well, and it's what pretty much made him a first-round caliber corner. If you don't handle opposite corner syndrome well, you don't handle OCS well, you could really see your stock plummet, and I thought he did a really good job of handling OCS at Ohio State. LLC Properties is one of the reasons he's able to do it so well. He looks, locates, and contests the football. To me, you know how I feel about that. If you don't have LLC Properties as a corner, you have a glass ceiling put on how good you can actually be at the next level. He looks for the football, looks back, I should say, then locates the football, and then is able to contest and make a play on the football. He's a willing tackler, not the greatest in the world, but willing to come up and be physical. And I respect his ability to come up and get guys on the ground. Toughness. This guy played through a broken wrist the entire season, essentially. I mean, the very first game I saw him in 2019, he had a cast on his wrist. So for all intents and purposes, this guy really was nursing a broken wrist all season long. The only game this season that I recall him not having a cast on his wrist was the final game that he played in against Clemson which was that long break that you get between the Big Ten championship game and the playoff game. And I think that allowed it to heal up a little bit. And he was able to shed the cast for that one game. It was heavily wrapped, but it wasn't with that hard, that soft cast that you saw him playing with for the vast majority of the season. So that's toughness, folks. And he knew what was at stake. He was in the equivalent of a contract year in the NFL. He knew that was his last year at Ohio State. It was put up or shut up time. He couldn't afford to miss ball games. And I thought that the toughness he showed playing with that broken wrist only added to his draft value and stock going into the 2020 draft. Physicality at the point of catch. To me, this is his best attribute to date. His ability at the point of catch to rake and scrape and scratch and claw and get that football out of the receiver's hand, to me, is what he does best at this very moment. When that ball's in the air, he probably isn't going to come down with it, but you're not coming down with it. And there's a lot that goes on at the point of catch with Damon Arnett. A lot of, jockeying for position, a lot of tugging and jostling, and a lot of extracurricular activity, a lot of tugging, a lot of loving, a lot of hugging. And I think he's going to see a lot of yellow at the next level if he's not careful. But he's definitely physical at the point of attack, at the point of catch. And I much rather err on the side of a guy being physical at the point of catch than not being physical at the point of catch. You go to his weaknesses. So just how fast are you anyway? I'm not sure. Again, the mystery and the mysteriousness around that 40 time. I'm not sure what he's running these days, but I watched him in a game against Cincinnati. And a white dude that didn't look like he was running very fast got on top of him, and he couldn't catch up until after the catch was made. And so that got me to thinking, maybe you are closer to a 4.56. But, those things happen sometimes. Guy might have caught him sleeping, like, oh, shit, white boy can actually run a little bit, and he fell asleep behind the wheel. Didn't happen again, but just saying. I don't know. How fast are you anyway? I don't know. Opens his hips up way too soon. That's one of my biggest pet peeves with him. Outside of the next thing that I'm going to talk about, this is probably 1B to that 1A that I'm going to mention sooner rather than later. But he's very, very aggressive in opening up his hips. The first movement that he sees, he reacts to it, opens up his hips way too soon, making him susceptible to in-breaking routes. A lot of times when Damon Arnett gives up routes, especially of the big chunk variety, it's usually on in-breaking routes because he opens up his hips too soon to the outside. That guy then breaks him off inside. Now he's got to turn all the way around. Now he's lost in the sauce, and that guy's open. It's a great example of that against Clemson on a 3rd down and long. He gives up a nice about 19 to 21 yard gain to Ross on a skinny post, essentially, where Ross opens up the route going to the outside. So he opens up his hips. Then Ross crosses him over, gets to the inside. And just like that, easy completion, big 3rd down conversion, and Clemson would end up scoring on that possession. And and they got hot offensively in what was a very lackluster first half. So he opens up his hips way too soon, and I saw that multiple times on tape. That's something he's going to have to rectify, or else it could become a big problem moving forward. He lacks elite plant and drive, what you would like to see from elite level corners. This is one of the reasons he was a 2nd round corner, is because you can get things underneath on Damon Arnett easy because he doesn't have the ability to plant and drive like the elite level corners in this league. The guys that can play off, see it, stick their foot in the ground and drive on it, they're the guys that you're afraid of. And you drafted one of those guys in this draft. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. And I actually like him more than I like Damon Arnett. But he doesn't have that ability to plant and drive on the football aggressively and make plays like that. And so that's something else he lacks. But here's my biggest issue with Damon Arnett. He's extremely handsy, man. He's a hands-on defender. Loves to touch. He's one of those guys that you say, look, man, keep your feet, hands, and objects to yourself. Stop touching people. You're invading people's personal space when you're not supposed to. There's a time and place for everything. At the line of scrimmage, you can invade that man's personal space. As a matter of fact, I would recommend you do that. Lay hands on him, baptize him at the line of scrimmage. Hell, point of catch. You can be a little physical. As long as you turn and look for the ball, they'll let you get away with some chicanery when the ball's in the air. But this is a guy that consistently wants to keep his hands on receivers. And to me, that tells me that he doesn't trust his abilities the way that he should. And maybe he's got a reason to not trust his abilities. But, on slants, when he's right there, I'm like, dude, let him go. You're getting a penalty for no reason. When he's in phase, he's got his hand on the shoulder. He's not even trying to hide it. You can get away with a little tug of the waist, a little, come here, man, you're getting a little too far away from me. And they'll let you get away with that because it's kind of subtle. He's got hands up around necks and shoulders. It's so obvious. I'm like, dude, can you be a little more discreet with your physicality? Can you be a little bit more discreet with your assault right now? And so I feel like he's going to get a lot of yellow hankies his way if he's not able to keep his hands to himself at the next level. He's a very, very handsy defender, but at the end of the day, solid football player, not worthy of a first-round pick in my estimation. I thought this was a bit of a reach by Mike Mayock, but this is a Mike Mayock type of player. When you listen to Mike Mayock talk, these are the kind of guys he gets excited about. To me, my player comp for him is Prince Amukamara, a guy that is going to be playing for the Raiders this year. So I think it's a perfect guy for him to learn from, because I think they have a similar skill set, similar body types, similar abilities. And so I think that's who he most reminds me of. I see him and I see a lot of Prince Amukamara in Damon Arnett in the first round, 19th overall selection, cornerback out of The Ohio State University. Damon Arnett for me is a 3. It was a bit of a reach, a little too early for my blood. I told you he was my 10th corner in this draft. You took him 4th, but that wasn't the reason that, this grade is so low. The reason is because you took him 19th overall. You took him in the first round. I thought that there were other guys available that if you wanted to go here, that were better options at the cornerback position that you could have selected at 19. But to each its own. We'll see how it works out for the Raiders, but not my favorite selection of their draft. We move on to the next pick in their draft, 3rd round, 80th selection, wide receiver, quarterback, running back. Lynn Bowden is the pick. 5'11", 204 pounds. Don't have an official 40 on record for him, but when you watch him, he's somewhere in the 4.54 to 4.6 flat neighborhood. So I think somewhere in there would satisfy me. I think that's what I saw on tape from him. The Raiders, interestingly enough, have this guy listed as a running back, and that's what you're seeing teams do in the league. They think they're slick, but no, they're not fooling anybody. Because of the purposes of pay. When you get to contract time, if you list a guy as a wide receiver, he's slated to make more money, especially if you have to franchise tag him. But if you list a guy as a running back, well, he's making significantly less now because of you terming him as a running back. So, there are multiple guys in this draft that have these ridiculous amounts of skill sets that suggest they could be, multiple positions and could easily be a receiver. Like Lynn Bowden could easily be dubbed a receiver. And a lot of people viewed him as such coming into this draft. The Raiders said, nope, we got a running back here. Redskins did the same thing with Antonio Gibson. Easily could have been deemed a wide receiver. They said, nope, we got a running back here. When you got guys with this kind of versatility, it's much easier to label them a running back for pay purposes. But nonetheless, to me, that's the best thing he does, though. Unlike Antonio Gibson, who I think is a better wide receiver than he is a running back, Lynn Bowden, to me, is a better ball carrier than he is a receiver and a pass catcher. And the numbers bear that out, but they can be misleading. I can tell you this, I'm a lot less high on Lynn Bowden than most people. I feel like his versatility very much exaggerated. I think some people blew his abilities up out of proportion, but That's not to take away from what this guy brings to the table. 185 rushes for 1,468 yards and 13 scores. Also, 30 grabs for 348 yards and a touchdown, and 4 punt returns for 53 yards and no scores in 2019. So this is a very, very busy man. Also played the quarterback position as well. His rush totals for his career: 206 rushes for 1,530 yards and 13 scores. So as you can see, most of his damage on the ground came in 2019. At the receiver position, 114 grabs for 1,303 yards and 6 touchdowns to go along with 9 punt returns for 199 yards and 2 scores, both of which came in 2018. So some gaudy numbers in multiple areas here for Lynn Bowden. I had a late day 2, so 3rd round, to early day 3, 4th round grade on him. So where you took him, kind of right in the sweet spot for a Lynn Bowden. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on, but compact, well-built frame. You know, one of those guys that's built low to the ground, low center of gravity, able to withstand contact and really be able to power through it as well. A creative play caller's dream is the next strength because of all of the things that this guy is capable of doing on the football field, including playing quarterback. So if you wanted to get freaky and you wanted to have a formation that was a little bit different, you could throw this guy at quarterback. You know, he can throw a pass, he can run read option, he can do a lot of different things to give the defense something to think about and something extra to have to prepare for in the week leading up to the game. So there's a lot of things you can do with him, not to mention that this guy is going to be a running back for the Raiders, but also a prolific pass catcher as well. So if you want to really force the defense to declare what it is they're doing on that given snap, whether it's zone or man, you can start him out in the backfield, then motion him out. And if that linebacker runs out there with him, you know, I've got man-to-man, you can bring him back in the backfield now, and you kind of can figure out where you want to go with the football. If nobody goes and they kind of just bump coverage, okay, I got zone coverage, now we know what we're cooking with. So there's so many things you can do with a guy like Lynn Bowden, and I think that's going to be one of the challenges, but it's also something that if you're a play caller, you're excited about. Challenge in the sense of, hey, we got to find ways to get this guy involved, but it's something you're excited about because it just gives you so many options. Can do some damage as a slot option, even get vertical. So I think his route running severely lagging behind. I don't think he's a dominant route runner, which is why I don't think he's a tremendous option in the slot per se. He's not a dynamic athlete. We'll get to all of that. But what he is able to do is get vertical. He can run by. It's the equivalent of sticking a tight end in the slot, except this guy can run. So he can get vertical and present some problems up the seam. And so I think there's some things you can do with Lynn Bowden in the slot. Tough with the ball in his hands with a splash of make you miss. Like I said, not the most dynamic athlete here we're talking about in Lynn Bowden, but he's dynamic enough to where he can make you miss out in space if you're not careful. But his cup of tea is more so being physical with the ball in his hands, running you over, falling forward, and getting that extra yard, a yard and a half after contact. He's a guy that can find a way to get every single yard that's available on a run and then some. So the toughness that he plays with is special, especially for a guy that was playing the quarterback position at one point. Good vision and run after the catch, run after contact. You call it what you want, but his ability to see the field, create when nothing's there, set blockers up so that he can get the most out of a run. That's something that I think is really intriguing when you put the ball in his hands. We saw that at Kentucky when he played quarterback. The vast majority of his rushing yards came as a quarterback not being accounted for. And so he was able to create. But then once he turned into a runner and declared himself as a runner, he was then able to use that vision to maximize runs and get the most out of each and every single carry that he had. special teams value. As I mentioned, this is a guy with punt return experience, 2 touchdowns in his career. So that is also at your disposal if you want to use him in that capacity. Has an edginess and a grittiness to him that, I think endears him to coaches, and he can kind of straddle that line and even cross it at times. We saw the pregame brouhaha versus Virginia Tech in the final game of his career that he played in. Got into a little skirmish before the game started, but that's that edginess, that's that grit that comes with the Lynn Bowden package, and I think that's something else that the Raiders are really excited to get. This is a guy that plays the game with that same kind of edge and toughness, and that's usually well received by the coaching staff. Weaknesses: not fast, quick, or that dynamic. He does have a little bit of juice, but it's not the kind of juice that people have been building him up as having. Like when you watch him, not a lot of quick twitch. It's not a lot of in and out of breaks. Bop, 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 bop. And next thing you know, guys broken off and he's creating massive separation. Like, that's not what you're really getting here in Lynn Bowden. He can create separation, but that's not really what this guy is all about. And I think that's why he's probably better suited as a running back. Speaking of which, most natural position is running back, but average at best there. And the reason I say that is because a lot of what he was able to do, as I mentioned before, came from him playing the quarterback position. So again, he's not being accounted for as a runner. A lot of those were predetermined runs. Some of them were drop backs where he just said, to hell with it. Don't like what I see. I'm going to take off. I trust my legs more than I trust my arm. And so it's easy to shred a defense when they're expecting you to pass and you turn around and you run the football and they're not accounting for you in terms of the numbers game. So, I don't know if he's that great of a running back option. We're going to find out. Like I said, I feel like he was overstated throughout this process. I felt like he was one of these guys that they built up as to what he can do. And then there were some other guys where you said, man, I see other guys that can do similar things, not play quarterback like this guy did, but can do some of the things he did. And they were pushed down the draft board. Why? It is what it is. His routes are stale and unappetizing. Like, you don't really get excited. I'm still hungry after I watch his routes. I'm like, that was all right. That was cool, but I'm still hungry. Like, I need more, so not really all that moved by his route running ability. And maybe he'll get better at that. And again, if he's deemed a running back, he may not be asked to do that as much. But if I'm thinking they're going to use Lynn Bowden the way that I think they're going to use him, he's going to see plenty of opportunities as a guy in the slot. They're going to maybe start him out in the backfield, motion him into the slot, and ask him to separate from a linebacker or a safety. So I think he's going to have to get a little bit better at his route running ability. Ball security. This is an issue with him. Very, very loosey-goosey with the rock. Some of it being a quarterback, some of it as a runner. Either way, I need him to protect the football a little bit more. 14 career fumbles, 7 of them lost. Way too many fumbles for his career. Gonna have to be a little bit more protective of the Duke. Got to take care of the rock, but very versatile player here the Raiders are getting. And as you can see, they want to upgrade the playmakers on the offense. Lynn Bowden helps you do that. My comp for him is a guy that went to Kentucky, did the same thing that he did, made the switch from quarterback to wide receiver in Randall Cobb. I see a lot of the same things. The biggest difference is Randall Cobb did have that twitchiness, did have the ability to give you that at the stem of a route, separate. I don't see that from Lynn Bowden at this moment. Maybe he'll get better as a technician at the next level, but he never really got a chance to focus and hone in on one position in college because he was at one point a receiver, at one point a running back, and at another point the quarterback out of necessity. So maybe he gets a chance to hone in on one particular position and gets really good at it. We'll see. But in the third round, 80th overall selection, running back out of Kentucky, Lynn Bowden Jr. for me is a 3. As we move on to the next pick in the draft, third round, 81st pick overall, wide receiver out of South Carolina, Bryan Edwards for me is the pick. 6'3", 212 pounds. Again, another guy with no recorded 40. He broke his foot in February preparing for the combine and the draft. So you got no 40 time on record for him. But similar to Lynn Bowden, I got the same exact time as a 4.54 to a 4.6 flat. I actually think Bryan Edwards is closer to that 4.54 than he is the 4.6 flat. Nonetheless, this is a guy that I really liked watching him throughout the process, and had him as my 18th wide receiver in this draft. He was the 16th wide receiver taken. And when you hear 18th wide receiver, like, you couldn't have liked him that much. That's how deep this wide receiver draft class was. Really, you could go about 20, 25 deep with how many guys were actual really good receivers that you felt like could come in and be a number one, number two option in this league. So he's one of those guys. I think he's no worse than a number two on a good football team. Bryan Edwards is your number two wide receiver. 71 catches for 816 yards, 6 touchdowns in 10 games in 2019. 234 grabs for 3,045 yards and 22 scores in 48 games in his career. I had a late day 2, which is the 3rd round, to an early day 3, 4th round grade on him. So he went right off the board, right around where I thought he was supposed to go. His strengths, size at 6'3", 212. That's some really good size. It's plus size for the NFL level. And he really carries his size well. Catching traffic is the next strength. Does a great job of catching the football in a traffic jam around a bunch of bodies. He's a guy that will come down with the football. You feel good about throwing him the ball in a tight, contested situation on 3rd and 8 and feel like my guy's going to make a play for me and move the sticks. And Bryan Edwards is one of those guys. Toughness, does all the dirty work. You're watching him break tackles. You're watching him block in the run game. You watch him run over the middle and catch a ball, take a shot. He does everything. He personifies toughness at the wide receiver position. They literally asked him to do everything at South Carolina. They did not have another guy on that football team at the receiver position that I felt like was a true difference maker. They had maybe one more target that they felt comfortable throwing the football to, but for all intents and purposes, Bryan Edwards was Mr. Do-It-All. Jet sweep, Bryan Edwards. Wide receiver screen, Bryan Edwards. Deep ball, Bryan Edwards. Underneath routes, Bryan Edwards. Intermediate routes, Bryan Edwards. Over the middle, Bryan Edwards. Whatever they needed, it was Bryan Edwards' show at South Carolina, and he did a lot of his damage with a freshman quarterback that they did not expect to have to play. But the injury to their starter after the 2nd game of the season really put them in a bind, and he had to step up, and he did. Physicality, kind of spoke to that already. I don't really need to harp on that. This is a very physical football player. Again, I remember watching him against Missouri run a jet sweep, and they got him bottled up on the sidelines. He's going nowhere here, it looks like. And matter of fact, it was against Alabama. Take that back. Early in that ball game, I think they run like a jet sweep to him. And there's no way he's supposed to get any more than 1, possibly 2 at the most yards on this play. Somehow he breaks 3 tackles, runs a guy over, and it's like a 7-8 yard gain. You're like, whoa, how the hell did that happen? It might even went for 10. It was crazy. It had no business there, but that's the physicality that he plays with. Run after the catch. It kind of speaks to that same kind of deal there. He's just physical with the football in his hands. Versatility, can play outside or in the slot, and gives you some punt return value as well. He did return punts in his career. So there's a lot of versatility here with Bryan Edwards. And like I said, another one of these guys, jet sweeps, the whole 9 yards, he can do it all. And he did that at South Carolina. Ran NFL route concepts at South Carolina. You watched him run the complete route tree. He ran the slants. He ran the speed cuts. He ran the bench route. He ran the dig route over the middle of the football field. He ran the post. He ran the post corner. He ran the 12 back to 10. He ran the stop routes. He ran the 9 ball. You name it, he did it at South Carolina. So he ran NFL route concepts, route combinations, things of that nature. Length and catch radius. He can go up and get the football. Watched him do it a couple of times against some really impressive corners. Got behind C.J. Henderson a couple of times from Florida. And so, you play in the SEC it's iron sharpening iron. And so this guy is battle tested. He's ready to go right out of the packaging. And I think one of the biggest reasons why is his length and his catch radius. It's what helps him separate himself from some of these other receivers in this draft. And not to mention his hands are A1 official. Again, one of these guys you just trust throwing the football up to. And he will work for food. A guy that will block in the run game, as I talked about earlier, does all the dirty work. All the things that you want from a blue-collar wide receiver you get in Bryan Edwards. His weaknesses, his speed is not top-notch, although you watch him on tape and he's consistently getting behind guys. I think some of it is the fact that guys are just sleeping on him. They see his frame, they look at him and they think, okay, this guy can't run. And then all of a sudden you get this guy taking these massive steps and he's a strider, and all of a sudden he's eating up your cushion, and next thing you know, you're flipping your hips and he's already by you. And so I don't think he is an elite speed guy, as I mentioned already, but he's got enough speed to threaten a defense and make plays. Injuries. Missed the final 2 games of his collegiate career with an injury. That's why he only played in 10 games in 2019. And then you also have on the Carfax the broken foot that he sustained working out, preparing for the combine and the draft. Productivity. I'm not going to beat him up over productivity. Honestly, he had a solid career when you look at his numbers in totality, but the numbers aren't eye-popping, but he didn't have the best quarterback play. Jake Bentley was solid. He was never great at South Carolina, so I won't kill him for productivity, but some people will point that out. Never had a 1,000-yard season at South Carolina. A lot of people will point to those things. That's fine, but that's not all on the wide receiver. Can he consistently separate at the next level? I think that's the bigger question is, can this guy separate on his own, or will you have to scheme up ways for him to get open at the next level? Even if he can't get open, I still feel confident that with his frame, his ability to use his body to shield out defenders, his ability to catch it in traffic, that he'll be useful to you even if he can't separate at a high enough level. He can turn into an Alshon Jeffrey type worst case scenario. And that's actually who I have as a comp for him is Alshon Jeffrey. And it's funny because he is another South Carolina wide receiver. And I see a lot of those same kind of characteristics out of Bryan Edwards, a guy that, may not be able to separate at the highest clip, but a guy that will be able to get behind some corners that fall asleep behind the wheel and be able to make some plays for you in some tough contested situations. I like him a lot, and I like this selection for the Raiders. They needed help at receiver. They doubled down on it by taking another guy here in Bryan Edwards. And now I think this receiver core looks really good. 3rd round, 81st pick overall, wide receiver out of South Carolina. Bryan Edwards, for me, is a 4. Like the pick, like the player. I think it's a great fit for this Raiders football team. You look at the next selection for the Raiders in this draft as we get to the 3rd round. Still in the 3rd round here with the Raiders' 100th selection overall. Safety/linebacker Tanner Muse out of Clemson is the selection. 6'2", 227 pounds. Ran a 4.41 at the combine, which got a lot of people's attention, including Mike Mayock. They love their Clemson football players. And so Tanner Muse is the selection here. 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, no forced fumbles, 3 pass breakups, 4 interceptions in 15 games. 10.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 14 pass breakups, 7 interceptions, and a block kick and a pick 6 in 59 games for his career. I had a mid to late day 3 grade on him, so anywhere 5th, 6th round, I was perfectly fine with that. You took him in the 3rd round, way too high for me, way too early in my estimation, way too rich for my blood. His strengths, however, thick, well-proportioned frame that may be able to add more mass. He already looks the part, and the Raiders have already come out and said this guy's a linebacker for us. And that was expected. A lot of people already assumed that his safety days were over. There were too many instances of him getting beat deep. I always look at that national championship game versus Alabama. He struggled mightily early in that game when Alabama was just going down the field. He would be in the perfect position, and guys were just running by him. He's just not cut out to be a safety at the NFL level. But when you take him, put him in the box, I think he becomes a much better defender. And I think that's what the Raiders are banking on. And I'll take it a step further. When you look at Tanner Muse and his skill set, and you look at the division that you play in with Travis Kelce, and now you look at the Denver Broncos, they just added Albert O. They already had Noah Fant. You're talking about 2-4-4 tight ends that can run. You add Kelce into the mix. You got Hunter Henry in Los Angeles with the Chargers. You got a bunch of tight ends in the division that can run with size. You add a guy like Tanner Muse, who you feel like can run with these guys, has the adequate size to keep up and make a play on the football. This is why you add a guy like Tanner Muse to the mix. But whether good or bad always seems to be around the action. And, usually that's a good thing. You want guys around the football. Good things generally happen when you're around the football. Sometimes he's late to the party, but nonetheless, you want guys around the ball. And Tanner Muse always seems to be around the action. Tremendous straight line speed. The 4.41 bears that out. And you get to see it at times on the field, whether he's opening up to go and catch someone from behind like he did with J.K. Dobbins, tracking him down from behind and saving a touchdown. They ultimately had to settle for a field goal on that possession. Or you watch him track down one of the Ohio State wide receivers on a big play, catch him from behind. Or you're watching him blitz, and I didn't think he did that enough at Clemson. I would have used Tanner Muse and that 4.4 speed on blitzes a lot more often than they did. But that's something else I would have used him to do a little bit more of. You get to see him open up, and the guy can definitely run in a straight line. Again, that's going to help you when you get the Hunter Henrys, the Noah Fants, the Albert O's, and the Travis Kelce's running up the seam in a straight line. Tanner Muse can keep up with these guys. Has ball skills and production to match. The 7 interceptions kind of speak to his ability to make plays on the football. You want guys that make quarterbacks pay for mistakes, whether it's their own or it's not their fault. Doesn't matter. Ball gets ticked up in the air, caroms off of a player's hands, or whatever the case may be. You want guys that make quarterbacks pay for mistakes, or receivers pay for mistakes. Tanner Muse, one of those guys that can do that, and the numbers bear that out. Can run with tight ends. I kind of spoke to that already, so I don't need to harp on that again. But that's part of the reason you take a guy like Tanner Muse here. By no means a physical thumper, but gets the job done as a tackler. I was shocked because of his frame that I thought he would be a more physically imposing tackler. Nah, guys aren't flying back. Normally, he's taking the brunt of the punishment, but he's a very good form, wrap and roll tackler. And so he gets guys on the ground, and at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Fundamentally sound defender that just does his job. He's one of those guys that a defensive coordinator can trust to be where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there. Doesn't bite down on the eye candy of play action fakes and bootlegs and things of that nature. Doesn't take a bunch of false steps in that regard. Very disciplined in his principles and his assignment, plays good assignment football, takes proper angles to the football, so really good pursuit angles. There's a lot to like about Tanner Muse, but then you get to the weaknesses, and there's a lot here as well. Struggles in transitions due to tight hips, and that's why I don't know how well he'll fare just dropping over the slot. I think he may struggle in that regard. And that's why you feel comfortable with him running with some tight ends, because you're not going to get a lot of, great movement a lot of times from tight ends. Their movements are a lot of times belabored themselves. But, you stick him over the slot against a shifty wide receiver, and it could be curtains. It could be good night for you. That's not what you want to do. That's part of the reason why he's not playing safety anymore. So got to be careful in what situations you put him in. I think he's going to be asked to check these tight ends out of the backfield, but also be a guy that's an underneath defender, underneath zone dropping defender, and I think that may be his best calling at the next level. Transition to linebacker will be a process. He's not as physical as you would like him to be as a linebacker right now. You got to see him play the linebacker position. He was a hard eval because a lot of his work was at safety, but I thought as you got later into the season, Clemson started to bring him down into the box a lot more, so you got a better feel for how the transition to linebacker would kind of look. And what I saw is a guy that's a little tentative right now, not really sure when to fire off his gun. That's to be expected because he's not a natural backer. He's a guy that's not as physical as I thought he would be. Thought he would at 227, damn near 230 pounds. I thought he would be a bit more physical. I see guys at 205 that come with a lot more thump than that of a Tanner Muse. And also, he's a guy that you can tell just still kind of filling out that position. And so there's going to be a lot of things that he's going to have to learn before he's able to really produce for you at a high level at the tight end position. It will be a process, that is for certain. He's straight line fast, but not a fluid athlete. And again, that's why he's not playing safety any longer. That's why he's being moved to linebackers, because when you get this guy out in space, he's a liability. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him, what they feel like this guy is best utilized as. Obviously, he's going to be a linebacker. I think more likely than not, they've got him because of the tight end situation in the division, and they just need a guy that has some size and some ability to run with these tight ends. We'll see how that works out for them, but at the end of the day, this was a big-time reach, way too early. And you know what I thought about when I saw this selection? I was watching this show, and there was a auction on a particular item, and the lady, she was bidding on the item, and she was up against another lady that was bidding on the same item, and they got into this bidding war, and it got to the point where she bids $185, and then she ends up bidding again at $200 over her own bid, and her husband nudges her and says, "What are you doing? You just outbidded yourself. What are you doing?" And I felt like the Raiders here on Tanner Muse, you just outbidded yourself. Nobody was fighting you for Tanner Muse in the third round. Nobody was going to take Tanner Muse in the third round. I would have much rather you taken John Simpson in the third round and then taking Tanner Muse in the fourth round. I get it. You didn't have a bunch of sixth and seventh round options, and so if you're going to take him, you had to take him. But nobody was going to fight you for Tanner Muse. And I say that not knowing that. Somebody else might have saw Tanner Muse the same way the Raiders did, and he might have been gone before the Raiders' next selection in the fourth round. Who knows? You did what you felt like you needed to do. I just don't agree with it. And so at the end of the day, third round, 100th selection, safety out of Clemson, Tanner Muse for me is a 2. I don't love this selection. I don't think this is a guy that will be able to help you right away. He'll help you on special teams, that's for damn sure, right out of the gate. But as far as a key contributor on defense, I'm not sure he's coming in and doing that right away. And when you spend a third round pick on a guy, he needs to be able to come in and help contribute on defense right away. As we move on to the next selection in the draft for the Raiders, fourth round, 109th selection overall. Offensive lineman out of Clemson, John Simpson is the selection. I love these Clemson players, boy. I tell you, man, if A.J. Terrell, I'm interested to know if A.J. Terrell is on the board at 19. Is Damon Arnett the pick, or is it A.J. Terrell? I'd like to think it's A.J. Terrell, really, seriously, because of the Clemson connection and the ties there. I'd like to think that pick is A.J. Terrell, whatever the case may be. Here's another Clemson Tiger being added to the mix. What is that, like 9 of them in 2 years? 14 games, 14 starts at left guard for the 6'4", 321-pound, 34-inch arm offensive guard John Simpson for his career. 50 games played, 29 of them starts at the left guard position. Really, all of his starts came in the last 2 seasons where he started 15 and 14 games respectively to wrap up his Clemson Tigers career. I had a 4th round grade on John Simpson. That was the sweet spot in this draft. 3rd round was where I thought the interior offensive lineman would start coming off the board, and I thought the 4th round was the best value you could get at guard and center. That's where you saw the vast majority of these guys come off the board, and I thought that's where John Simpson should have come off the board, and he did. Has the look of an NFL offensive guard. He looks the part, man. When you think of an offensive guard in the NFL, you look at a guy like John Simpson and you say, yeah, he looks like a damn guard. You know, looks the part of a guard. And he plays like one as well. Big and strong with tons of power to move men. This is a guy that is a man mover, okay? Whether you're asking him to combo block someone, get to the second level, you're asking him to double team, or you're just asking him to base block and just take somebody out himself. he does a very good job of creating space in the run game. And some of the biggest runs Clemson had down the stretch were right off the ass of John Simpson. And so you see it. You see his ability to create space for the running back or for the quarterback or whomever is toting the rock. He was a really consistent force along that offensive line. No go on the bull rush. He cancels the bull rush. So if you're thinking about trying to take John Simpson and deposit him into the lap of the quarterback, think again. You're wasting your time and your energy. Try something else because he's just not going for it. And even if you catch him slipping, you catch him sleeping early in the rep, somehow he's able to anchor down and put that to rest. So on tape, at least on tape, the bull rush, not happening. Now, you get in a division and you get a Chris Jones in front of him, somebody with long arms that may catch him off guard. He's never seen a guy like that. And he saw guys like that. Like, one of my favorite games to watch him in was against South Carolina. I really wanted to see how he was going to play against South Carolina and their defensive tackle. And he struggled a little bit. He handled himself well, but he struggled a little bit. That quickness, that length, it was problematic for him, all right? And so Javon Kinlaw gave him a little bit of work, and you got a guy similar to that in your division in Chris Jones that could be problematic. You got another guy in the division that's an up-and-comer in Los Angeles with the Chargers from Notre Dame that they drafted last year, and Jerry Tillery. So you could have some issues with some long guys that could potentially cause some problems for a guy like John Simpson. But I can tell you one thing, the bull rush is a no-go. A good punch with length to stun a rusher and force him to recalibrate. There's nothing like a good old-fashioned punch in the chest to a defender that thinks he's about to put a move on you that makes him rethink what he's about to do. You get that engine revved up and you start revving it up and then you hit the gas and you start to take off and then bow. You're like, whoa, oh, okay. All right, maybe that speed rush to the inside, that's not going to work. Maybe I'm going to try a spin then. He's one of those guys that heavy hands, you feel him when he contacts you, and he's got a really stiff punch that really, really stops the momentum of a defender. Looks for work when it is scarce. I love that. One of those guys. No assignment in particular on this play. Nobody lined up over him, so he's not blocking anybody. Center's got his hands full, or he doesn't. Doesn't matter. John Simpson is coming over to eat some ribs, man. It's time to eat. And he's tearing guys up, and he's looking for work, man. Whether he's got to go to the left tackle to get some work or the center to go get some. He's going to find some work, man. Even if it's not a lot out there to be had, he's going to go find him some work. Love it. Bends at the knees, which helps with leverage and generating movement. A lot of times when you get these bigger guys, I always talk about 6'5" usually being that mark, where you get those guys up there with a little bit of length on them and height. Hard for them to bend at the knees. They like to bend at the waist. That's the lazy thing to do. John Simpson, not 6'5", he's 6'4", but at 300 and north of 320, it's easy to get lazy. He's not lazy, man. He's bending at the knees. That helps him in the leverage battle, which usually helps him in anchoring down because he's got a nice, solid, firm base. And it also helps him as a drive blocker where he's able to get up under the pads and move defenders against their will. You go to his weaknesses. Heavy feet, man. All right, this is a guy that struggled with Javon Kinlaw. Why? Because Kinlaw had length and quickness. And so off the snap, Kinlaw won with quickness. John Simpson's feet, not quick enough to mirror. And what that causes is a guy struggling to hang on for dear life. And that takes me to my next weakness. When he gets beat, he blatantly holds. I mean, these are the most overt holds you've ever seen. Like, bruh, could you at least be a little bit more discreet with what you're doing? Right now, you are physically assaulting a man. I've seen people put in jail for less than what you're doing right now. He's literally tackling. There was some form tackles by John Simpson on tape, man. Right? And generally, you don't want to see guys picking up penalties on tape. And for the most part, you don't see a lot of it. For guys that get drafted, I saw ample flags being thrown on John Simpson on tape where he's just mauling guys, like, and not in a good way either. Just absolutely grabbing guys, coarse collaring them, tackling them by their waist, grabbing them around the midsection, grabbing them around the ankles. It was bad, man. He's going to pick up some holding penalties. I'm just telling you right now. When John is beat by speed and quickness, his first default is grab on and hold for dear life. His shoulders can get out in front of his toes, causing imbalance. And essentially what I just described to you is a guy that lunges. And when he lunges, he overextends. He's anxious. He wants to get his hands on guys. And because of that, his shoulders go over his toes. He's now off balance. And that's when he can get beat. And that's when you get those holds again. So he's got to be a little bit more cognizant of, got to keep my shoulders over the toes, keep my balance, and not overextend. Don't lunge. Don't be anxious to get my hands on guys. Let them come to me. I don't have to go to them all the time. Elite quickness or wide angles are his worst enemy. And when I talked about the elite quickness already, but wide angles are just as problematic for John Simpson. And what I mean by that, if you get a guy coming around on a stunt, on a twist, when you get those TE games, all right. So the end, or in his case, the ET game would be the problem for him, because you get the defensive tackle stunting outward and the end coming in, looping inward. And if that end comes wide, not tight, but wide, and you got John Simpson helping squeeze down on that initial defensive tackle that's forcing that double team on the inside, and that guy comes looping around the outside, he can't respond to that. It's too wide for him. The movements that are necessary of quick feet to be able to shift and redirect your weight, he can't do that. All right. When you see guys get around him that go wide, it's too much space and opportunity that he has to cover. That's not what he does. The further he gets away from his post at left guard, the more problematic movements become for him. So he's a guy that in a phone booth is problematic. He's going to do work. You get him out of his comfort zone. You get him out of that phone booth, and you got John Simpson right where you want him. But to me, he's got plug-and-play guard written all over him. There were rumors about Kelechi Osemele being traded and being on the block. I could see something happening there if a team has an injury or something like that. Whatever the case may be, John Simpson, to me, in the 4th round, 109th pick overall, is a 4, man. He's a really good football player, plug and play if you ask me, and I think the Raiders got themselves a really good football player moving forward. The final selection in this Raiders draft is a damn good one that I'm really excited about. And, it's not often that you see a team's draft end in the 4th round, but that's the case for the Raiders as we go 139th overall selection. Cornerback out of Louisiana Tech, Amik Robertson is the pick. 5'8", $187, ran a 4.4, 540, 8 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 16 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, and 2 pick sixes in 12 games. For his career, 23 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 34 pass breakups, 14 INTs, 2 blocked kicks, 3 pick sixes in 38 games. That's a lot of production, guys. And keep in mind, he's 5'8", $187, which I'm going to continuously remind you of because everyone else thinks that that's something that they have to continuously remind you of. I had a 3rd round grade on him, and let me just say this. If this guy were 5'10 or 5'11, he's a 1st round pick. Simple as that. But he's 5'8", and so people ding him for that. I'm not going to. I had a 3rd round grade on him, though, because of the size. You can't ignore it. But Adam is my 13th corner in this draft. He was the 16th corner taken. So I think this is tremendous value, first and foremost. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on, but let's get to these strengths. Man or zone coverage. To me, he's got uncanny animal instincts. All right. This guy is a savage. Okay. Straight up and down. No two ways about it. He was my favorite corner in this entire draft. I love me some Amik Robertson. And everybody would always point to the size. I don't give a shit, okay? When you have the ability that this guy has and the mentality, the dog, the lion, the physical animal instincts mentality that this guy has, you can't replace that. There's no size, there's no speed, there's no replacing what this guy has. He's dripping swagoo. All right. I mean, god damn, he's dripping swag. Man, he's not afraid of anybody. I'm watching this guy take on giants out wide, and he just doesn't care. I mean, you would think a guy at 5'8", less than $190, would be afraid of a 6'5", 6'6", 225-pound receiver. He could give two shits. I'll give you a great example. Watching him against Texas. All right. First game of the season. They got a couple of big boys out there, too. They got this one big receiver, like number 85. Can't remember what his name is. But he looks every bit of 6'4" and about 215. And probably more like 220. He looks really big. And, Amik Robertson on 3rd and 2 early in the ball game steps up to this man, got all in his face, deleted the airspace. Was like, what's up, bruh? Was good. I mean, close enough he could smell the man's breath. All right, whatever he ate for lunch, Amik was smelling it. All right. Jams the man. I mean, this man probably has him by a good 30, 40 pounds and at least a good 6, 7 inches. And Amik jams the snot out of this guy. I mean, damn near pushes him out of bounds. They try to throw the slant to the guy. And Amik damn near picks it off on 3rd and 2. And he's like, Don't let this size fool you. I will do you. Okay? All right? And a wise man once told me, I'm like a stepping razor. Don't you watch my size. I'm dangerous. That's Amik Robertson, man. And so the next play, they go for it on 4th down. They says, okay, so you want to try one of our big receivers. Try this one on for size. All right, so they throw Colin Johnson at him, who's 6'6", 225. And Colin says, I saw what you did to my mans over there. I'm not him. And Amik says, okay, we're going to find out. And so off the snap they go, 4th and 2. And Colin pushes the shit out of Amik Robertson. He falls backwards and he catches the slant for a 1st down. But he wasn't afraid, though. Stepped in his face and was ready to go at it with him. And that's where the size does come into play sometimes. Anyhow, he's a ball predator. You've heard of ball hawks, right? This is different. He's a ball predator. That's different. That's next level. Not ball hawk. Hawk. That's, you can get anybody being a ball. He's a ball predator. That's something different, man. That's something else. Soft hands, leaping ability, timing, all of these things all in one package. And then the mentality and the IQ of when to strike. You put it all in one package and you get a ball predator like Amik Robertson. And the numbers, they speak volumes. 14 INTs in just 38 games. 3 of them go to the crib. So when he gets it, he's not just satisfied with picking you off. He's looking to turn it into 6. House call. All right. His plant and drive, elite. And remember, I talked about Damon Arnett lacking that. That's why Damon Arnett didn't have high interception totals. And Damon Arnett's hands are not A1. I thought he could have had 2 or 3 more. I cut him a break. That's why I didn't add it into the weakness category. I cut him a break. The man was playing with a broken wrist. So I cut him a break on, some of the passes I thought he should have come down with in 2019. But this is a guy that has plant and drive. I told you that Damon Arnett did not, and that's why you saw a lot of underneath completions not really being contested and turned into catches on him. That's not the case with Amik Robertson. He is contesting every goddamn thing. Nothing's free, nothing slides, all right? There's no free passes, no free meals. Ain't nobody getting free lunch. If you gonna eat, you paying for that shit, man. Ain't no free lunches out here, all right? Not on Amik Robertson's watch. Physicality at the line of scrimmage, again, for a 5'8", buck 87 corner, you're not supposed to see this level of physicality. The man plays the position like he's 6'2", 215. All right? I mean, the physicality at the line of scrimmage is frightening. The way he lays hands on him, you would think he's a pastor, man, because he's out here baptizing dudes at the line of scrimmage, man. I mean, he's just laying hands on dudes and forcing you. If you're not sure about your get off on the line of scrimmage, if you're not sure about how to actually get off the ball and get off the line of scrimmage, you're going to struggle against Amik Robertson because you're not going to even make it 5 to 7 yards up the field because he's going to just jam the snot out of you at the line of scrimmage. Will tackle. He tackles like a safety, okay? And there's a hit in the Southern Miss game that if you want to treat yourself to a clean, legal, physical hit that you just don't see very often in the NFL anymore, go treat yourself to Amik Robertson versus Southern Miss on a shallow cross. He's being nosy. He's got coverage on the other side of the field. He sees the shallow cross coming his way. He's probably in cover 2, so he's kind of just sitting over there waiting and praying on a poor defenseless receiver. This is all on the quarterback. Don't hang me out to dry like this, man. He throws the shallow cross, never sees Amik Robertson coming, never has a chance. Amik, and this is where being 5'8" comes into play, because if he's 6'2", this might be helmet-to-helmet contact. But because he's already low and in the strike zone, all he has to do is just drop that shoulder right into the midsection of that receiver. And boy, did he ever. Bow! Dropped his ass. And that receiver did not get up. He was down for about a good 2.5 minutes, writhing in pain. Ball separated from man. Man, it was a thing of beauty. He plays the game physically. And again, you're not expecting that out of a 5'8" corner. LLC properties. I really don't have to explain myself here. You don't get 14 interceptions and 34 pass breakups in your career if you don't possess LLC properties. If you're not looking, if you're not locating, if you're not contesting. You know what it is. I don't have to explain it. The numbers speak for themselves. Stay in phase and rarely panics. That is such a rare quality in today's NFL with cornerbacks. Guys' first default move when they aren't sure where the ball is and the guy's got to step on them is to panic. Now I'm face guarding. Now I'm grabbing and I'm tugging and I'm hugging and I'm loving. Now I'm looking for the flag to come out. This guy doesn't. I didn't see him panic not a single time on tape. And there were times where guys had to step on him. He didn't panic. You know what he said? Let me find out where the goddamn ball is first. And he looked back, and all of a sudden, he's making a play on the football. He's able to stay in the hip pocket of guys. He does a lot of work early. You know, it really helps. Just like a post player in the NBA. You know what helps is if you do your work early. Don't catch the ball out there 18 feet away from the basket. Catch the ball at 6 feet away from the basket. Now all you got to do is turn around and put it in the hole. Here with Amik Robertson, he's doing his work early at the line of scrimmage. I'm going to make sure you don't get off to a fast start so that I can turn around and run with you and stay in that hip pocket and stay in phase. Does a tremendous job of doing that. His overall impact on the game is just tremendous. Let me go through these stats one more time so you understand the magnitude of what this guy brings to the table. 23 tackles for loss at the cornerback position. Okay? I know linebackers that don't have 23 career tackles for loss in 4 seasons. All right? 4 sacks. All right? I know linebackers and safeties that don't have 4 career sacks. 2 forced fumbles. All right? 34 pass breakups. 34 pass breakups in 38 games. That means he's on average getting his hand on a ball a game, essentially, is what I'm telling you. 14 INTs means he's damn near picking off a pass every other game, is what I'm saying to you. All right? 2 blocked kicks. So he's impacting special teams. And 3 of those 14 interceptions the other way. At the end of that, he's picking up the phone, making a house call. All right? So he impacts the game in a multitude of ways, not to mention how physical he is with these receivers and ball carriers. So now you get to his weaknesses. Obviously, the elephant in the room, you attack that right away, is size. Look, you can't get around the fact that he's 5'8". I get it. I understand. I don't give a shit. All right? I can't tell you how many times on tape I'm watching him and you hear about his size. And teams just kept going after him. And you know why they were going after him? Because they saw a 5'8" corner against their 6'3" receiver and they thought, we got a mismatch. We got to take advantage of this. And I'm sitting back watching this and I'm saying, you know how there's that one kid in school that people like to pick on? Good old Larry, good old Eric. And you're like, man, they keep picking on Eric, and Eric's quiet. He don't say nothing to nobody. And you thinking in the back of your head, y'all gonna fuck around and Eric's gonna beat one of y'all ass, or Eric's gonna bring a gun to school one day and it's gonna be a problem. And I don't like talking about stuff like that, but you like, hey, y'all better stop effing with Eric, man. I'm gonna tell you right now. Eric gonna kick one of y'all ass. And I was watching film. I'm sitting back watching Marshall, and I'm watching Southern Miss, and I'm watching all these teams keep targeting Amik Robertson, and I'm saying, y'all better stop messing. Y'all better stop messing with Amik before he pick your ass off. And sure enough, he pick him off, and I'm like, they just don't get it. Stop messing with Amik. All right, I know he's 5'8". He's not the one. Go try somebody else. Can he adjust to the slot life if need be? The default answer for everyone in the NFL is, he's less than 5'10", got to kick him inside to the slot. Can't put him outside. Too big outside. Too many trees out there. Hey, look, man, I've always said I'm a guy that says, you prove to me that you can't before I just say that you can't. I'm going to give you every opportunity to prove that you can before I say that you can't. If I'm the Raiders, before I just sweep Amik Robertson inside to the slot, I'm going to say, all right, Amik, show me what you got outside first. And if he said, if the teams around the league prove to you quickly, all right, Amik ain't built for the outside life at this level, then you kick him inside. But for me, Amik Robertson is going outside. He's going outside to play with the big boys. And if he comes back in the house with a bunch of scrapes and he says to me, Mom, Dad, I can't do it, that's when you kick him inside and you say, all right, Amik, we're going to keep you inside, man. We're going to shelter you a little bit. But I'm letting Amik go outside and play with the big boys because I think he can handle himself very well out there. Just fine. All right. But the question is, if need be, because he didn't do a lot of slot work. He did do some. There was some evidence of that, but most of his damage was done outside. Can he handle the slot if he has to kick inside? And then the last weakness is it's the gift and the curse of being a instinctual football player that feeds off of the mistakes of a quarterback. This is a guy that sags off of his man to make interceptions and is very smart, understands route combinations, and so he's very nosy. But, sometimes his eyes is bigger than his stomach, and that can get you in the end sometimes. A great example is against Marshall. He's playing a receiver. It's 3rd and 8, so Amik is in his mind saying, you're not running a deep route here. You're going to try to run something around the sticks. And the guy comes off the ball, running hard like he's running a 9-ball, and Amik is waiting. He's sitting on this comeback. This is 12 back to 10 in Amik's mind because it's 3rd and 8. Or this is back shoulder fade. So Amik is ready to jump anything breaking back towards the outside. And that receiver does a great job of just giving him a quick hezzy. It wasn't much. He never stopped his feet. Just hezzy. And Amik stopped his feet for a second because he was looking to come back to the football. He was trying to run the route. And the guy got on top of Amik and he couldn't catch up. And Amik was right there at the end of the play. Swiped at his hands and everything. He was able to come down with the football, a gain of 30 on 3rd and 8. And that's sometimes eyes bigger than your stomach. All right. And you're going to have some of those with Amik where he's supposed to be carrying a route deep. He sees the outbreaking route. He's supposed to be in cover 3 and he sees an opportunity to jump that out route. And all of a sudden that quarterback eyeballs that out route and ends up going up top, going upstairs on them. That's going to happen from time to time. When you get guys that eyes are bigger than their stomach, they're always hungry. They're always starving for a big play. And sometimes you just got to eat what's there in front of you and say, you know what? I got enough to eat. My stomach's full. I'm good. I'll save some for later. Amik's one of these greedy defenders that's always looking to eat. He's always starving, even though he just ate. And so sometimes that's going to backfire on him. But I love this dude. I really do. I'm a Amik Robertson fan. I'm going to be watching this guy closely. I'm going to follow his career because I believe in him. He's the guy I'm banging the table for in 2020. I haven't banged the table for a guy like this since Alvin Kamara some 4 years ago. I'm banging the table for Amik Robertson, and I don't do this very often, but in the 4th round, 139th pick overall, cornerback out of La Tech, Amik Robertson for me is a 5. I don't do 4th round 5s very often. I don't. They're so rare. But that's how good I feel about this guy. potential star in the making here in Amik Robertson. You heard it here first. I'm sticking to that. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and tell you I was wrong. But I feel good about Amik Robertson, man. And so love this selection by the Raiders here. And I actually like this draft overall. You know, there are a couple of picks that, Damon Arnett in the first round. All right, Tanner Muse in the third round. But outside of those two selections, I pretty much love everything the Raiders did in this draft. And 5 out of 7, not bad. You know, and it's not to say that those two guys aren't going to actually contribute very heavily for the Raiders. But I just have my doubts about those guys. But at the end of the day, love this draft from the Raiders. And the score pretty much bears that out. 3.71 for the Raiders, which amounts to a B+ for the Las Vegas Raiders in the 2020 NFL Draft. Another masterpiece put together by Michael Mayock and company. That's my guy. Mike Mayock is my guy, and I expect him to do work in the draft, and I think he just did for this Raiders football team. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network. While you're there, go ahead, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Also, if you want to stay abreast of what's going on here on the Louie T Network, best way to do that is to follow me on the socials, whether it's Twitter, @Louie T Network, or on IG, Louie T Network _. Either way, it'll keep you in the loop on what's going on here on the Louie T Network. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys stay safe. Take care of yourself. We'll reconvene later. Have a good one.